Hello, and welcome to Knights of the Nerds Table. And folks, we are coming up on a very special occasion. You see, 60 years ago, on November 23rd, 1963, two teachers from the Coal Hill School stumbled upon a little blue police box in a junkyard that led them on an adventure across the universe. That is right, it is finally time for us to talk on the channel about Doctor Who. Step on into the TARDIS as we get ready to talk about the UK's premier timey-wimey ball of fun. Now, this is normally the part of the video where I talk about the history leading up to the release of Doctor Who's 60th anniversary. And we have a bit of a problem because Doctor Who has been around for 60 years. How do I fit 60 years of history into a 10-minute video? And the answer is by skipping a lot of details, but we're gonna do our best to get you ready for the 60th anniversary. Doctor Who debuted in 1963 on the BBC, and the conceit of the show has largely remained unchanged. The show follows the Doctor, an alien Time Lord from the planet Gallifrey, who, prior to the show, stole a time machine called the TARDIS, which stands for Time and Relative Dimension in Space, and he began a journey through time and space. The Doctor is almost always accompanied by one or more companions, usually human, who assists the Doctor in both getting into and out of trouble. The show was originally conceived as an educational children's program, but it wasn't long before the show became an adventure program instead. The Doctor would arrive in a location and stop some alien threat that's terrorizing the locals, then move on to the next adventure. The final key to the show's longevity came in its fourth season. In 1966, William Hartnell, the actor playing the Doctor, had been experiencing failing health and troubled relationships with the producers, so he was ready to leave the show. But rather than allow the show to end losing its main character, the writers elected to introduce regeneration. Basically, when the Doctor or another Time Lord is mortally wounded, they can reset themselves, healing all of their wounds at the expense of giving them a new appearance and personality. And so, the second Doctor, Patrick Troughton, was cast, and the show continued uninterrupted through the seventh Doctor in 1989. During the show's initial 26-year run, the Doctor would come into conflict with his most iconic villains, such as the Daleks, the Master, the Cybermen, and more. Unfortunately, nothing lasts forever, and after its 26th season, Doctor Who came to an end. Seemingly forever. The only exception was a single American-made TV movie introducing the 8th Doctor, Paul McCann, which was not picked up to series. The classic era of Doctor Who has been and remains beloved, and if you're looking for an in-depth review of the classic Doctors and their stories, I highly recommend you check out Diamanda Hagen's Guide to Classic Who, which you can find right here on YouTube. It wasn't until 2005 that Doctor Who would actually get a formal revival, spearheaded by Queer as Folk writer Russell T Davies. Davies, who was openly inspired by Joss Whedon's Buffy the Vampire Slayer, revived Doctor Who with a similar sense of naturalistic, witty dialogue and high camp melodrama. Davies' first series introduced a new generation to the Doctor in the form of Christopher Eccleston, but after Eccleston elected to leave the show, the New Who era brought us its most well-known incarnation of the Doctor. The 10th Doctor, played by David Tennant, was a skinny, hyperactive geek whose chic style and rapid-fire dialogue, combined with his borderline operatic relationship with at-the-time companion Rose Tyler, brought about an unprecedented new interest in the show. This interest would continue past the Tennant and Davies era into new showrunner Stephen Moffat's run. While Moffat's first run with 11th Doctor Matt Smith retained the height of popularity it was at previously, by the time of the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi, finishing his run, the show had somewhat fallen out of the zeitgeist, and the shot in the arm presented by then new showrunner Chris Chibnall and 13th Doctor Jodie Whittaker unfortunately did not seem to last long. Now, don't get me wrong, by the end of Chibnall's run, the show was still going strong, particularly with its improved visuals and, in my opinion, excellent COVID season, Doctor Who Flux. But the show was not the event it was during the 10th and 11th Doctor's runs, and it appears that the producers behind Doctor Who have felt the same way, because last year, the show began a massive behind-the-scenes overhaul just in time for its 60th 60th Anniversary. Chris Chibnall was announced to be stepping down from showrunning, with prior showrunner Russell T Davies announced to be returning. Disney Plus picked up the rights to air the new series in the USA, taking them away from BBC America, and sex education star Ncuti Gatwa was announced as the next Doctor. Of course, the biggest surprise came when, in the 13th Doctor's farewell episode, Jodie Whittaker regenerated, not into Ncuti Gatwa as we all expected, but rather into David Tennant, the former 10th Doctor, who was then announced to be the new 14th Doctor. After this episode, and after much confusion on Twitter, it was announced that David Tennant would be acting as the 14th Doctor and reuniting with his iconic former companion, Donna Noble, played by Catherine Tate, for 3 specials that would air beginning on November 25th of 2023. Then, Gatwa would take over on the traditional Christmas special and beyond into a new season, which we have now learned is being dubbed as a new Season 1. We are essentially in the era of New Who.
New.
There's a lot to be said about the fact that, in order to revitalize the Doctor Who brand, the powers that be have decided to take us right back to 2006. But to their credit, it seems to have worked. I remember when Jodie Whittaker's regeneration aired, how excited and abuzz the Doctor Who community on Twitter was, in a way that really it felt like they hadn't been in years. For the first time since Matt Smith, a Doctor Who premiere feels like an event with a capital E, and I think there's good reason for that. In addition to the return of David Tennant and Catherine Tate, Neil Patrick Harris has been cast as classic First Doctor villain, the Celestial Toymaker.
It's gonna be legend. Wait for it. And I hope you're not lactose intolerant, because the second half of that word is dairy.
And the Doctor Who production team appears to be continuing with the increased production values that we saw in Chris Chibnall's era. I remember back in the 6th season of New Who, the marketing push that came from Doctor Who just filming in America. But this feels like the marketing is that Doctor Who has, for better or worse, finally gone Hollywood. And I have mixed feelings about that. As someone who's watched Doctor Who since back in the 10th Doctor's era and has gone back and watched a lot of classic Who, one of the things that I love about this franchise is how campy and low budget it can be, and how it is such an inherently silly premise. I don't necessarily know that I want Doctor Who to be sleek. But at the same time, if this revival brings more fans back and puts more eyes on the product, who am I to complain? And the fact is, even if we are retreading some old ground, it is good old ground. Tennant and Tate's chemistry is the stuff of legend, and this absolutely feels like an amuse-bouche to get us ready for Gatwa's brand new Doctor, which Ncuti Gatwa has assured us is going to be very different. So that's that, an extremely truncated history of the production of Doctor Who to get you prepped for 14's first adventure. Let me know what you're excited to see from this new era of Doctor Who, and we will see you next time for more conversations around the Nerds Table. Allons-y!